Dan Freeman, and tonight we're going to talk about tactics. We decided to do the webinar on tactics mainly because with training and coaching there's a lot of information that's out there, but tactics is one thing that a lot of people ask about, and there's not many there's not many websites or books with a lot of information, and sometimes I think a lot of people are a little bit shy to ask on tactics, so we thought it would be beneficial for everybody to do a webinar this evening. The main things we're going to talk about is conditions that affect the different tactics for racing. The main 5 things that we thought of consideration are wind. Wind obviously plays a massive factor in race tactics. You can use it. It can be used as an advantage, but it also can be a disadvantage. Hills, again, they play a big role in tactics. Obviously, if you're someone who can climb well, then it plays an advantage to yourself. If you're someone who isn't a gifted climber, then you need to know what tactics to play to to get over the hills. Sprinting, again, if you're a quick sprinter, it's a massive advantage. But if not, there's a few tactics you can play. If it's going to be a sprint and you're not a noted sprinter, there's a few tactics you can use to get the jump on the other riders. Riding in Pacelines, that's another key skill. You can see on the picture on screen now that the riders are all in a diagonal line. The wind is obviously playing a big factor there. And again, like I said before, attacking, often in races there's a lot of attacks, and especially if you're not a sprinter, you need to be able to make make the attacks to try and win the races. So they're the main topics we're going to talk about. Racing in the wind, like I said, wind is one of the biggest factors that influences performance and success. Being aware of the wind direction is essential. Stephen, do you want to explain the wind, how that can play a big role?
Well, as Dan said, sort of racing in the wind and wind factor during a race is probably one of the biggest influences in the outcome of a race, and certainly one of the biggest influences that people will have on their tactics during a race. We see it in some of the biggest races in the world that the professionals do, albeit you look at something like Tour of Qatar, or obviously places that have very little vegetation and hedges to obviously block the wind. That wind is extreme significance to the overall being of the race and the overall result. But that can be taken into local races here as well in the UK and Ireland, where wind plays a significant factor. Potentially maybe a factor that you're not aware of, or as much as a factor of what you're aware of. Potentially there's other riders using the wind and the wind direction to their advantages. So it's something that everybody needs to be aware of, and certainly especially on the circuit races that a lot of the races are held on, maybe you're doing 4 or 5 laps of a circuit, is understanding the wind direction, and also, especially what we'll talk about later on, is the effect of a sprint and the wind direction coming into a sprint as well, are all very, very important. And again, it's something that you should certainly be made aware of and looking at before the race starts.
Okay, as we can see here from the picture, I think this is a picture from Tour of Qatar, and in Qatar the wind has a massive impact, because in Qatar there's more or less no climbs at all. It's about as flat as a race as you could possibly get, but often the peloton breaks into many groups. And that damage is caused by the wind. So just because there's no climbs in there doesn't mean it's going to be an easy race and the bunch all comes in together. So as you can see here, the wind, you need to be aware of the wind direction. So from the rider's left-hand side, you can see that the wind will be coming from their left to the right-hand side, and it's forcing the riders across in a diagonal position. So what happens here, it's called an echelon, and the rider on the front, he pulls into the wind, and everybody in the diagonal line behind him is getting certain degrees of shelter. So when they try and keep the turns on the front short, because when you're on the front there into the wind, obviously that's the hardest part. So they'll rotate and pull off, and there'll be one line going up and then one line going back down. But it's only really the people that are in the diagonal line who are getting the shelter. If you're not in that diagonal line, there's often like a tail of riders, a string of riders going down like towards where the race vehicles are. And if you're in that position, you're getting very little shelter. So it's really important to make sure you get in that echelon. Do you have anything to add to that, Stephen?
When you're in them sort of situations that you have certainly a lot of wind, and there's maybe a part of the circuit that you're going to feel the wind on your left-hand side or the right-hand side a lot more. It's essential that you are positioning yourself in a peloton or a bunch of riders close to the front. That obviously you're going to make the most of that ability to get shelter in the wind, and you're not getting yourself into that tail of riders, which we have a couple of visual pictures here later on to actually show you the effects of what we mean about the tail of riders. So trying to make sure that we always say you're close to the front but not at the front. It goes, I suppose, in a sidewind situation is more important than most. So from that, if you know and you understand the capabilities of what a wind can do to a peloton, and you also have a group of people that are cohesive and riding in the wind, and certainly being able to echelon to an extent that your ability to get a good paceline going in a wind, and the gap that you can make on a potential group of people behind you that aren't echeloned out or aren't in a paceline that is being effective in the wind, you can get a lot of really, really good gains in it. One thing that I will make everybody aware of is obviously whenever you have the wind, and certainly the extremities of the wind, like you're seeing in this picture here of a guitar, riders have obviously the ability to spread right across the road. Obviously in races in the UK and in Ireland, we obviously don't have that ability to spread ourselves across the road. So it is a safety issue as well. I do, and I have been in races in the UK and Ireland where you feel like you're getting pushed out, maybe towards the white line, because you're trying to get shelter in the road and you're trying to get shelter in the wheel in front of you. And to get that shelter means, if you want to get it, that you're crossing the white line and potentially into dangerous areas. And at that point, you have to obviously think of your safety more so than the tactics of the race. So, I just want to, and that is a rising issue that a lot of people have in races here in Ireland and the UK certainly. So, it is great having all that tactical awareness and awareness of the wind, but again, your safety in open roads is paramount. So I think we'll go on to the next slide there, Dan, and maybe a bit visual on.
Yeah, actually the slides come later, so we'll just talk about the different types of wind. So side wind racing, it's important if the winds are coming from the side, like Stephen said, it's even more important than normal to stay in the front of the bunch, because as soon as, if the wind comes across and it splits into an echelon like we can see on the picture, the wider the road, the more people can obviously fit in that echelon. So in a race like there with Queteau, it's on a big open road, you could get maybe 15 people in each line. So you've got maybe 15 to 20 people in the the forward and backwards line combined, and everybody else is out of shelter. But obviously, the smaller the road, the less people. So in the UK and Ireland, you could probably only get 5 or 6, maximum of 10 people. So it's really vital to stay as close to the front as possible when you're approaching side wind sections in a race. Again, alter your position in the bunch depending on the road direction. So obviously, if you're going in one direction in a race and then suddenly you change direction, the wind's going to be coming from, it might be coming from the left, and then you turn and it's coming from the right. So again, you need to know when to move forward. If you come into a bit, if you've got a tailwind, it's not so important, or a headwind. But if you then come to a section of side winds, it is really vital that you move towards the front, because at any moment the bunch can split into lots of groups, and you may be caught out. You need to use your energy to maintain position in the group, especially if it's splits into echelons like in the picture. It does take a lot of effort to maintain position in the echelon, but it is a lot easier to be in the echelon than to be in the string of riders behind. So although it does take an effort, that's the one time where you don't want to be too cautious and don't try and race too clever and miss, sit at the back of the group, because in an echelon it is easier to actually go through and take your turns, because as soon as you come out of that echelon and you find yourself in the string, you are on borrowed time. So that's the one time I'd definitely try and take your rotations on the front. Again, the group has to be cohesive. As soon as if the group split and your group keeps working, you only have to spend a short amount of time at the front, maybe 10 seconds each time. But if you just keep working, and then you can pull a big advantage against groups that aren't working together. 10 or 15 riders really committed and working together as one unit will pull out a big advantage. In side winds, it really isn't the time to attack solo, or if you are in the lead, it's so much easier in a group. So if you're solo in front and there's a group behind, it's a good idea to I'd definitely think about sitting up. If you've only got a slight advantage, go back to the group and get in the group, because you're just going to be using so much energy. Because if there's 10 of those against one of you, and they're all taking short turns in front, they're only really using 1/10 of the energy that you are to maintain the same speed. So there's a good chance you're going to get caught anyway, and you're going to waste a lot of energy. So it really, not a time to be going solo. And again, like we said, keep short turns. Probably, roughly 10 seconds is probably about right. Stephen?
Yeah, just on that, regarding obviously the position of the bunch and how the change in the circuit can also alter the wind direction. With being smart and certainly being organised, maybe learning from the last lapper or the last 2 laps that you've been doing on a circuit, you can use that wind direction and changing of that direction to your advantage. Potentially you're in a group of people and you know that you're in a side wind currently, and you're able to attack, and whenever you attack you've only got maybe 600-700 meters to get a gap, maybe in a side wind, but after that you're turning into a tailwind. At them times it can be to your advantage, because you can get a gap and people maybe aren't willing to work with you or to go with you if you're riding into a side wind or a headwind. But if you know that you have a quick change of direction of the wind, and you already have that small gap before you go into the tailwind, then of course you have that advantage of then getting into a tailwind. But again, that's all about knowing how to use the wind to your advantage. If you're, as Dan says, you've got a 5-second gap or a 7-second gap, and you're in a long road with a side wind for a prolonged period of time, and there's a long way to go to the finish, then you're going to waste a lot more energy than what you're going to gain and result at the end of it. So, yeah. So thank you. Go on to the next slide.
Okay, we've got some visuals here. As you can see on the picture on the left-hand side, the wind is clearly coming from the left-hand side. So the rider who's halfway going back on the left, he's just taken his turn on the front, and now he's passed backwards, joining the guy on the right-hand side. So it's the forward line, the fast line, if you like, is on the right, and then once you've done your turn, you literally freewheel back, just making sure you save a little bit to kick to get on the back of the group. And then do you want to talk about the second picture, Steve?
Yeah, it's just that's really what we're talking about earlier on, about the change in the rotation of the group that you're in. If you are in a small group, depending on obviously the wind direction. Again, it's something that I see, a lot of riders here, and certainly in local races, they tend to keep rotating along with the same, either rotating on the right and doing that for a full lap, and not really changing, even though the wind direction is changing. So you can see here, they're rotating on the right, and then whenever the road veers a different direction, they're starting to rotate around the left. And again, having a group and being cohesive in that group and having an understanding in that group that, okay, you've got to change your rotation as quickly as possible, has really big advantages, especially if you're in a small group of, like in these pictures here, of 5 or 6 riders, and you're in a group behind of maybe a bunch of 10 or 20. If you can get organised, and you're in a small circuit, the wind's changing, you're using the wind to your advantage, and you're rotating and changing your rotation as the wind changes, it has some really good benefits, and certainly you can open up that gap a lot better than potentially a group behind that isn't changing with the dynamics of the wind and whatnot.
Okay, again, there's just some more pictures. Like I was talking earlier, the wind is coming from the left, and there's 8 or 9 guys here who are getting the benefit of that, or they're getting some shelter. So the guy in the white is currently on the front, he's getting the maximum wind, but everybody behind him in that echelon there is getting a decent amount of shelter. The guys in the backwards facing line there, you can see the wind is hitting them from the left hand side, and they've got nobody to shelter. So if the guys on the front here are doing 10 seconds each, they've then got roughly a minute and a half when they get shelter. So they're only getting 10 seconds of wind every 9 seconds. Whereas the guys in the string here are just getting wind the whole time. So they have to be really, really strong, or the string is going to break. And even if they are really strong, obviously they're fighting the wind, and that's just going to be taking energy out of them all the time. So it really is important. And it's also, sometimes if you're in the string, it's better to actually move out and form a second echelon. Signal to the people behind you that that's what you're going to do, and it'd be easier to do that than just wait and sit in the string, because if you wait too long in the string, you're just going to go too much into the red, and then when the group comes back together, you've wasted a lot of energy. The only note of caution there is you have to be careful of doing that, because if you pull out and the other riders don't know what you're doing or don't do the same, then you've kind of swung out into the wind and then you're stuck there. So you have to make sure there's experienced riders around you if you're going to pull that tactic. And the picture on the right, you can see the wind's coming from the opposite direction, and again, it's going across. It doesn't look in that picture the wind is too fierce because there's quite a big bunch behind. If it was really fierce wind, it would be a longer string of riders. So, anything to add there, Steve?
No, I think you've you went through everything there.
Okay, a different type of wind now, tailwind. A tailwind is difficult to escape a fast-moving group. Obviously, if you're in a tailwind, it's a lot easier to go fast, but also, you know, if the group's going at 30 miles an hour, you know, it's very difficult for you to ride off the front. It's easier for other riders to chase groups and attacks, saving energy. Again, if you're being assisted by the wind from the back, it makes things a lot easier. Again, like Stephen said there, it's really vital it's really good tactic to attack just before a tailwind, because if you've got a headwind or side wind and you attack and get a slight gap just before you turn left or right into a tailwind, and then the wind, you get a gap, you've done the hard bit, and then the wind pushes you forward. You know, if everybody's going as fast as they can, it's very difficult it is difficult to close people down once they do, if and when they do get a gap. And in these conditions are excellent. If you're a strong rider, time trialist, that's the time to be using the tailwind. And obviously it's easier to sit in the peloton here because you're just getting, you know, pushed along by the wind. Headwind racing. You don't really want to be sat on the front at this time because you just, you know, going into, it's like hitting your head against a brick wall. You're just getting pushed by the wind. So obviously somebody's got to be on the front, and if there's a, you know, a team on the front, you know, you can sit behind them quite easily. It's very difficult to maintain a solo effort. Again, so this isn't the time to be attacking solo, because the wind will just push you back. Short turns required in Paceline. Again, the stronger the wind, the shorter the turns. You need to keep rotating. If you've got a really good aero position, it can help because obviously the wind is just creating drag. So the more slippery you are through the wind, the better. So get as low as you can. It's difficult to organise a chase because it's just you're just fighting. You know, you're going straight into a brick wall. There's no assistance from the wind pushing you forward. So everybody has to be committed to organise a chase. So it is difficult. And again, the cadence can often drop because there's a lot of resistance. It's like going up a climb. You know, there's a lot of resistance being created. So you have to make sure not to push a big gear and sap your energy.
Just on that a wee bit, just racing into a headwind. One thing that we do see a lot of obviously is that cohesiveness. You know, I think what Dan was saying about a lot of people just don't want to take, you know, they don't want to take turns to the front obviously because, you know, into a headwind they find it obviously it's quite harder. What I will say is in them situations, if you do find that maybe you're in a bigger bunch and you're not having the cohesiveness of a group and a large peloton, you know, you doing your turns at the front and the difference in the power that you're putting out compared to the difference of the power that the guy sitting in the bunches putting out is drastically different. You know, obviously there's a large gap there where maybe in riding in a tailwind isn't so much, but in them situations I would probably encourage you to, you know, make a split or try and make a split, not solo of course, but making a split with a group of people. If you are determined to get away and not be pulling turns at the front of a large peloton just for the sake of bringing back a break. Of course, it's a bit different if you're working for a team, which we'll talk about later on. But in them situations, I certainly wouldn't encourage wasting your energy to pull along a group of 20 or 30 guys to take a few turns to try and bring away a breakaway. At them points, it would be in a position to maybe make attacks with a few committed riders, maybe organising with teammates or organising with some riders who are also committed, and just saying, well, the hell with this, we're going to try and get a group here, and we're the ones working, and we'll get organised. Step back off the gas for 2 or 3 minutes, and then hit them hard into a headwind, really with a cohesive group of 3, 4 riders, whatever, and certainly don't waste your time at the front of the peloton trying to chase for no particular reason, especially if you're going into a headwind. So,
okay. Okay. The next difficulty on a race is on the climbs, on the hills. It's really important to keep consistent power. A lot of people attack, the bottom of the climb really hard, and then they're dying by the time they get to the top. It's actually more effective to increase your power over the top. If you look on the diagram on the right hand side, if the guys are going up the hill, they might be doing 17 miles an hour, and then on the crest of the hill you may be doing 20 miles an hour, but the guys going on the start and the descent, they're already up to 27, 30 miles an hour. So if there's a long line of riders, this is the time when gaps can open up, because the guys are going 30 miles an hour on the front, and there's a line, and the guys on the climb are only doing 17. So it's really difficult for the guys still on the climb to accelerate. So if you save energy on the climb and then really push forward on the over the top of the climb and to start the downhill, that's a really good time to attack and open up a gap. You need to keep as forward as possible coming into the climbs and at the start of the climb, because there's also a thing called sliding room. So if you're a great climber, you hit the climbs, and this is the place to attack. If you've got a high power to weight, this is your playground. This is where you're going to make your move. But if you're not such a good climber, there's little tactics that you can do just to help yourself. Whereas if you start towards the front of the climb, and say it's a 3 or 4 minute climb, and there's 100 riders or 60 riders, you can slowly lose a little bit of ground all the way up the climb, and at the top of the climb you may be then at the back of the group, but you're actually still in the group. Whereas if you was to start towards the back of the group to begin with, and then you move and you lose the same amount of ground all the way up the climb, by the top of the climb you're no longer in the group, you're out, and you've been dropped, and you may get back on and descent, or you may not. So if you're not a really gifted climber, it's really important to be in a good position at the start of the climb. And if you equally, if you're a very good climber, you need to be in position so you can follow attacks or make attacks yourself. If you start too far at the back, you have to make a lot of effort to get to the front, and then you can start making your moves. And again, there's you need to avoid riders that can't maintain the power on the climbs, because again, you don't want to be taken out the back of the race by someone who's a weaker climber than yourself. So if there's people constantly sliding backwards on the climb, you don't want to be stuck behind them, and if they go out the back, you go with them. The other thing just to be aware of, obviously, talking about attacking over the top of the climbs, you've got to be aware and know what, on the descent, especially, UK and Ireland, there's often cars parked on the roads and things. So if you know there's a dangerous corner, don't go flying into a descent and go, straight on into the corner and crash off the road. That's really not going to help you. So you've got to be aware of, know the circuit and know what's coming up, even on the descent.
And just on that a wee bit, attacking over the top of the climb, for me, potentially, or certain riders who maybe weren't exactly, fantastic climbers, where climbers would want to attack at the bottom to maybe get as much ground by the time they get to the top to make their advantage very big. But for maybe those non-climbers or people who aren't that confident in their climbing but feel like they have an ability to hang on as much as possible, attacking over the crest of a climb is really good. Looking at that diagram, you can see maybe just you're going over the top of a climb, maybe the front of the group is at 17 mile an hour, or if you're over the top, and you can see that in, again, the professional races, you can see it starting to string out. It's exactly the same ethos of what we have in local racing. You've got a wee bit of a gap over the top. You've got that speed coming down the far side. Might only be for 500 metres or a kilometre, but you can start to pull out quite a bit of advantage of compared to a guy that's going over the top, and potentially they don't have the same impetus as you once they're going over the top. And that was a tactic that I would have used, and I have seen being used an awful lot. Really, that last maybe 200 metres of a climb or 300 metres of a climb, you're not going to get dropped. You've got a couple of bullets left there that you can take to go over the top and make a big dig. And it certainly is a great tactic to use for those of you that maybe aren't too confident in going from the bottom. And also, it's something that you should probably train. A wee bit of coaching there, but I would certainly practice that in training sessions. It's a real good wee hard efforts going over the top of the climb and maintaining leg speed and getting a bit of effort and a bit of torque on the downhill as well. Certainly put that into your training sessions as well.
Yeah, lots of riders do practice that. You need to be able to know how to make these efforts and practice making these efforts. So practice it in training, maybe riding up the climb a good pace, but maybe seated, and then when you see the top, come out the saddle and attack hard over the top and maintain the pace on the descent. That's something, if you do that once a week, when you get into the race situation, it'll be second nature.
Yeah.
Sprinting. This is something that's never been my forte, but you can make life easier for yourself by knowing the finish line conditions. So obviously, if it's a flat sprint or it's a climb or there's wind, it all makes a big difference. Because in a headwind, you don't want to be doing a long sprint. If you saw Milan San Remo at the weekend, the guy there, forget the name now, who got second, Alexander Kristoff, he started his sprint a little bit too far out from the finish, and if it was a tailwind, he would have been, he'd be assisted by the wind, and you can sprint for a bit longer. And once you're up to speed, it's very difficult for someone to close you down. If you're going 35 miles an hour, they've got to go, if you get a gap on them, they've got to go 40 miles an hour to catch you up and pass you. If it's a headwind and you're only sprinting at 20 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour, it's a lot easier for someone to take shout behind you and then come past. Again, if it's a side wind, you want to be starting your sprint as sheltered as possible. So if the wind's coming from the left and someone's on your left-hand side, you can tuck into the side of them and get as much shout as possible. And then when they run out of energy, you can, jump past them. Obviously, coming into the finish, you can't be too far back. If you're too far back, and you could be the fastest sprinter in the world, but if you start 50 meters behind the guys in the front, you're going to have to go so much faster to catch them. So, it really is important to maintain the position. That's why if you see the big teams, they always start with their whole team towards the front, and that's, part of that is it's easier to keep. If they get up there on the team, it's a big effort for the riders, but the guy who's a sprinter, he's getting a lot more shelter and he's just maintaining his position, whereas if he was in the bunch, he'd be fighting against all the other riders. It'd be very difficult for him to get in position, and he'd waste a lot of energy. Again, if you do know there's a strong sprinter or a team with a strong sprinter, when you start getting towards the finish, the last 3 or 4 miles, you need to follow them around, because if it's going to be a sprint, they're going to be they're going to be up there. So if you can follow them, maybe work off the back of them. If you don't have a team, try and get in behind their lead out train, that sort of thing. It's always a good way to do it. And again, if you are a sprinter, you need to save energy. Some guys are really, really fast sprinters, but if it's a hard race, they may have taken the sting out of their sprint. So there's no point being the fastest sprinter when fresh if you get to the finish and you're on your knees. Again, there's a few tactics. Not everybody can sprint. So if you can't sprint, there's different tactics. Do you want to?
Yeah. Yeah, again, I can probably do that from being a non-sprinter. I spent most of my career trying to figure out how to avoid a bunch sprint. Just going back, first of all, about the sprinting, biggest thing, again, what I see in racing in Ireland and the UK is sprints are usually one on positioning, not just the person's power. So the positioning in your bunch and how you're starting to sprint, people starting too early or people starting too late, and also getting on the right side of a rider depending on the wind. Okay, so you're getting not just the quickest contours, not just, might be a slight bend round to the left. Yes, it might be, a wee bit faster if you're going on the left-hand side, but if you go on the left-hand side, potentially you've got all the wind. So whenever you look at that, you go, do you know what? Yes, it's quicker if you're going from a roadway, that yes, it's on the left, but from the wind, I'm getting a lot more advantage by starting the sprint on the right and going past them as close as possible and getting that advantage of being sheltered as you're going past. So that is a real big aspect of sprinting here, is certainly positioning and also, wind direction as it's coming in. Non-sprinter, there's always that wee bit of apprehension and a wee bit of tension, obviously in the last sort of 2 kilometres, maybe sometimes 3 kilometres. And my advice, and the best advice you can take, is really try and maximise your ability in that last kilometre or 2 kilometres, and don't wait for the sprint. If you know that you're going to come 10th in the sprint or 20th in the sprint, why wait? The thing is, have a go, attack, hit them hard, you've got one bullet, and I always put racing in the finishing line, so you have your finish line at 500 metres to go, and if you've still got a gap there, 4 or 5 seconds, then pure willpower and a wee bit of luck, maybe you're going to get to the finish in your own minute. So it really is, don't wait until a sprint if you're not a sprinter, and if you're confident that you're not going to get into it. Position yourself in the top 10 with a kilometre to go, hit them with 800 metres to go, full gas. If you think there's a wee bit of a lull, don't be going from the front, going from maybe 10 back or 7 back, and making sure that you give that full gas. And if you finish 20th or 30th, well, at least you know you had a go. So certainly that would be the best way to do it. And certainly don't come to a sprint knowing that you're not a sprinter and accepting coming 30th. You might as well have a go and see what happens. Maybe a wee bit of luck comes on your side and finish 30th, or you might go out of the bag sometimes. So there we go.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. This is one that's used often in UK and Ireland. Pace riding, up and over in the UK, we refer to it more as through and off. Effectively, you go to the front and then turn, take the turn on the front and then slide backwards down the slower lane. So there's one fast lane, one slower lane. Again, we've kind of talked about this a lot already, but for a group to succeed, everybody in the group needs to be going through. If people start sitting on, what happens is people lose interest, they start arguing, they start thinking, well, if this guy is going to miss his turns, then I'll miss mine because he's going to be saving energy. So, as soon as the group breaks down and stops working together, then it just deteriorates and it's doomed to fail, really. So it's really important that one person takes control and just keeps everybody working just a little bit and often. Again, alter the side of moving up and dropping back into the group. Again, like we said, you do your turn into the wind and then pull off. If it's a headwind or side wind, you do shorter turns, like we've already spoke about, and longer turns in a tailwind. Tailwind, you're going so much faster. You can do, 30 seconds on the front. In a side wind or tailwind, headwind, you may be only doing 10 seconds to maintain the same pace. This is one that, like I said, if somebody leaves a gap or stops working, it really does decrease the speed. So it's important that if you're feeling strong and someone does leave a gap, just go to the front and try and do an extra turn just to keep everybody smooth and moving. The smoothness and the speed is essential, and what you don't want is one person missing a few turns and then feeling really strong and really erratically charging through, because the speed will shoot up, but then everybody behind will be struggling to maintain that pace, and then everybody will slow down because they can't continue. So I've seen that before, whereas you get one person who kind of thinks they're Superman and they try and charge through, as hard as possible, and they think they're doing the right thing, but actually they're just breaking up the group. So if you are strong, just stay on the front for longer. So keep the pace the same, but just do a longer turn. If you start accelerating up from 25 mile an hour to 30 mile an hour every time you hit the front, the people behind are just going to be, really struggling to hold on to you, and then they'll when it's their turn to hit the front, they'll be wanting a breather, so they'll be going through slower, and it just really breaks it up. Stephen's just going to tell you how corners, a little bit about the corners when you're in a group, how that can increase the lead over the bunch.
Yeah, just a wee bit on before that, on what Dan was talking about that filling the gap. Whenever there's a small group, like in that picture there, you can see, the riders come off the front, and normally he would go behind that rider that's in the white, and it's up to that rider in the white to actually say, you know what, I'm going to sit on, I can't take a turn, because if that rider in the polka dot who's coming off the front and he goes past that guy and all of a sudden there's a big gap, they've got 5 or 10 meters, then it's a lot of energy to close it, and then as a whole usually turns into a bit of a slight altercation in the group, saying, why didn't you hold the wheel, or move up. All it takes is for somebody to say, sorry, I'm going to sit on, just take that turn, or whatever it is. It's better doing that and keeping the cohesiveness of it than dropping back and having big gaps being opened up in the group. So definitely is that, as Dan said, that cohesiveness is probably the most important than just sort of ignoring it and trying to get a guy to do a bit of work. Whenever you're in a small group, corners obviously can increase the lead over a chasing bunch. Whenever you're in a small group, you've got a large bunch of riders going into a tight circuit, or into maybe 2 or 3 corners in the space of about 700 meters or a kilometer. Every time a bunch is coming into a corner, it takes obviously a wee bit longer for everybody to accelerate. Maybe the 3 or 4 guys at the front don't want to be as cohesive and do a lot of work. There can be 1 or 2 seconds of stall every time you come out of a corner to keep that bunch together. And every time you stall a little bit in the bunch, 1 or 2 seconds, that's the break getting another 5 seconds advantage. Okay, so you do that over 3 corners, and that break is now 15 seconds advantage over a bunch that has just not been as quick to accelerate out of a corner, been as quick to get organised out of a corner, and all of a sudden after 10 corners, it might be only 3 or 4 laps, and that means that obviously the break has gained maybe a total of 20 seconds or 30 seconds, just because they're a lot more cohesive coming out of the corners and bends, getting organised coming out of the corners, making sure they're getting into the pace lines really good, and again, as of course that was said earlier on, being organised in the wind as well. So certainly small groups work a lot better than big pelotons on tight circuits with a lot of bends and twists in them. So it can be a tactic that you can use as well if you're trying to get away as well. It's a good tactic to be in a group, a small group, on a tight circuit with lots of corners.
Yeah, that's like in a criterium race. Often a small group goes up the front and they can take the corners faster than a group of 50 riders. So into the Pacelines, there's really two main types of Paceline. There's on the left the single Paceline, where you can see the right hand side is moving forward. They swing off to the left or whichever way the wind's coming from, and then drop straight to the back. And then the other Paceline is a double Paceline, where you've got the right hand side, which is the fast lane, move forwards, and then coming back, you pull off. So literally once you pull off to the left there, that's in effect your turn done, and you then decelerate and you go down the line backwards.
I think normally I would look at the single pace line being used when you're in maybe in a tailwind situation, where somebody can take a little bit more longer turn to the front. You can maintain the speed a little bit easier, obviously, in a tailwind. But when you're going into a headwind situation, you're looking shorter turns to the front, as Dan said earlier on. You want that rotation being quite quick, but maintaining the speed. Then you're looking more into sort of a double pace line situation.
Yeah, it's important on the double pace line, like I said, when you move to the left and you get into the slow line, is to back off. Often people go too fast and gap the guy on the first guy in line on the slow lane, and that again can break up the group. So it really is important not to charge through too fast so that the person can't get on your wheel. Just keep it smooth as possible. Brings us on to attacking. When you need to know when, or think about when's a good time to attack and use those efforts wisely, because for most of us, we only have a certain amount of bullets in the gun, or energy, so to speak, that you don't want to be just attack, in the places that aren't going to make an advantage. You really need to think about, where you can gain advantage. So if you're a climber, you can obviously gain advantage on the climbs. If you're a big, strong guy, you can gain an advantage going into a tailwind. But really think about where the most likely place is that you can get a gap and make it work. And if it's on a race that's on a circuit, maybe spend 1 or 2 laps just studying the course, the first couple of laps, and just pointing out where the group splits, where it comes back together, and really thinking about a good place to attack. Like we said, we keep saying, really important just to avoid attacking into a strong headwind or before a headwind section. It's okay attacking out of a headwind if it then turns into tailwind, but if there's a 2-mile stretch of road that's a headwind, you don't want to attack 500 meters before that, because as soon as you hit that, you're just going to go backwards. It's really important, you don't want to be attacking from the front, so what you want to do is drop back slightly, so when you attack, you pick up your speed, and when you go past the other riders, you're already going full on speed. So it's very difficult for them. They've got to then start accelerating to try and get on your wheel. And if you attack from in front of them or the side of them, they can see what you're doing and they can quite easily accelerate up to your speed. Whereas if you've already got up to full speed, you really took down and you're going for it, when you go past them, it takes them a lot of effort to get up to your speed. So that you really have to think, I need to drop back and then charge forward. Like I said, never attack. Attacking from the front is a big no-no. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is if you've got another rider who's committed and you can attack together and share the work, then it really can help, because you can take it in turns. You can say, look, I'll go do the first attack and I'll do 30 seconds into the wind, and then when I flick you through, you come past, you do 30 seconds. And if you've got 2 of you really, really working together, really committed, then it might take the guys behind. If there's 5 or 6 guys behind, there's obviously they've got an advantage, there's more people. But if it takes them a little while to get going, and get working together, by that point you might have already got a minute up the road. So that can really, be an advantage. We've got some slides on this. So on the left there's the solo attack. So there's two riders in front. The guys drop back slightly. You probably want to not drop too much back, so you've got too much to catch up. But if you just drop maybe 5 or 10 meters off, just so you're up to speed, and you don't want to make it too obvious either. If you drop back 100 yards, then people can turn around and see what you're doing. So if you just drop back momentarily and then charge forward, that's the best way to do. The other way to do it is the two riders have dropped back together. So the guy in the black, he'll burst forward, and then the guy with the striped jersey, once the guy in the black runs out of speed, he'll come past and take his turn. And again, like I said, really working together is vital.
Just a wee bit on that. One of the real big issues that I see sort of locally racing is guys attacking from the front. Maybe not right in the first one or two riders, but in the front enough that a lot of riders are starting to see him going down the gears, and they're starting to see that particular person, know what's coming up, and it's very easy to jump on. Whenever you do an attack, you've got to obviously pert. You have to be 100% committed. There's no point, doing unless you're doing sort of dummy attacks or whatever as a tactical thing for your teammates. But certainly, it's something that you really want to get the maximum out of. And from that, you want to be taking it as much surprise as possible. So you want to be taking the rest of the riders with as much surprise as possible. So from that, there is dropping back from 10, 15 riders, and also making sure that when you attack, if possible, that you're attacking on the sheltered side. A little bit like sprinting, but doing it obviously in a safe way, but attacking from a sheltered side. So whenever you're coming out of the peloton, whenever that bullet's coming out, that you are coming out from a sheltered side, so you've got a lot of speed up from being sheltered on a certain side of the peloton, and you're able to really maximise your attack. So again, just avoid attacking from the front if possible.
Okay, the last subject really is how to race as a team. So if you're in a team, a club, it can really, if you work together with like-minded individuals, it can really help. Obviously, everybody has their opportunity. So some races you may have a climber, so you all work for those. Another week you might have a flatter race, and you might have a sprinter. So if everybody works, does their turn in working, but then another time, you might be the protected rider. So everybody gets a chance, and it works. It works really well if everybody's committed to riding as a team. You need to go in with a predetermined plan. And everybody needs to know, and everybody needs to agree on the plan. So if one or two riders decides a tactic, but they don't pass that by the other riders, and they don't know what they're doing, then that's when it's going to go pear-shaped. And equally, if someone doesn't agree with the plan, and they think, well, I'm not going to do that, why should I help this guy? Then again, it's not going to work. So you need to get guys together, discuss it, say, someone needs to take the lead a little bit and say, this is what I think we should do, but everybody has to buy into that, otherwise, it's not going to work. And then once you make a decision, obviously factors can change on the road, because you might have your plan, but if another team has got a different option, you might want to keep the bunch together for a sprint, but then there's other people that want to do the opposite. So you do need to change the plan, and you have to think of backup plans along the way. But if you can try and stick to the original plan as much as possible, it really is going to help. Like I said, you need to ride to individual strength. So there's no point going to the hilliest race on the calendar with a sprinter who can't get over the climbs and expecting him to win a bunch of sprints, because the likelihood is he's going to have been dropped a long time before. So you really need to think about what riders you've got, what their strengths are, who's suited to doing what roles within the team and who's on which given day is going to be the protected rider. And then if if you find yourself in a situation where there's a breakaway, and there's generally two things: your team has missed out in getting a rider in the breakaway. It's always a lot harder to, as soon as you chase in a breakaway down, you're kind of on the back foot. So you need to try and, first and foremost, to make sure you've got people following the attacks, so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you are missing the breakaway and then you have to put your team on the front and chase it down. That wasting a lot of energy. But if you are, if you are a team with a good sprinter, then it may be the tactic that you're going to let a breakaway go away, and then you're going to chase them down towards the end and do a lead out for the sprinter. But you have to think about all the different options. And then if you do a lead out, you really need to be committed. You need to know where the finish is. You need to know how far out from the finish you can go, because if you've got, the more riders you've got, the longer you could start your lead out. If you've only got 4 riders, you're not going to be wanting to do more than a mile, 2 kilometers on the front. And as you get closer to the finish line, the riders' turns will be shorter, but they'll be faster. So the first person may do 800 meters, but might do 28 miles an hour, and then as it goes down and closer to finish, the guys are doing less and less, and obviously your sprinter's only going to be wanting to sprint maybe 250 meters from the line. So you need to. This is something that really needs practicing. The time to be practicing it isn't in a race. You need to get together on a weekend when there's no races, preferably on a closed road like a motor racing circuit if possible, and really practice different combinations and find who's the best suited to each position in the lead out train. Stephen, have you got anything for the team?
Just really, the part of a predetermined plan and having some things organised beforehand. I know everything usually changes on the road as it goes along, but trying to have sort of underpin some sort of general tactic that you can use in a backup plan again, as you can use using riders maybe earlier on in the race to your advantage. If you're wanting to, maybe there's a hilltop finish or a hilly finish, trying to use a lot of the sort of more riders with a bit more strength, maybe the guys that are less confident in their ability that time, trying to use up their strength as much as possible in the early part of the race, and piggybacking off the back of it. You don't need to be as regimented as obviously the professional teams and whatever, but you can still have a similar sort of ethos and a little bit of planning. And the most important thing is just don't ride against your teammates. If you do that, if you just don't help other teams, I think that's you're in a win-win situation. Again, I see times in races or watching races that teammates are chasing other teammates, maybe not intentionally, but just because they're getting into a pace line and they're starting to work where really it's not for them to work, and it's really a good a good excuse to actually sit on. So at them sort of situations, you just don't want to race against your teammates, and use as much excuses as possible to sit on if you have an advantage on the team. So yeah.
Yeah, again, some people might think that riding for the team, you're kind of putting yourself at a disadvantage because you may, if your teammate goes off in a breakaway, then you don't want to be chasing down. But if you you can then use to your advantage that if there's a counter attack, once a breakaway goes away, don't just sit up and think, oh, that's it, it's finished. You can look out for counter attacks. You can jump on the back and you can get a free ride across, saving energy. So once you get there, then you're a lot fresher. So sometimes having teammates in a break in front can be a disadvantage if you want to be up there yourself, but equally it can work out in your favour as well. So riders as a team is often a much better option than just as an individual. Okay, that's it for the slides actually. So we just going to go through some of the questions.
Yeah,
Answer some of the questions.
we've got a few questions coming in. If anybody else wants to put a few questions in there, you'll see at the bottom of your little panel, you can just sort of type in some questions. So we've got a few in here. We won't be able to get through all of them, but if you just want to put some in, and I'll do my best to get through as many as possible. So I've got the first one here. I've got then about trying to form cohesive groups, but the problem is trying to get members of other teams to work with you. Here in France, they just let you fry. Obviously, you're racing in France. I think me and Dan both have experience of racing in France, certainly in the amateur teams, and we sort of feel your pain on that one, David. But yeah, I mean, whenever you're trying to get other teams to be cohesive, it's probably in their depending on the race situation, it's maybe in their advantage to not be cohesive. At them points, I would be trying to look at how I'm going to get out of this group, and not be in a situation that my work is benefiting them. So, that might be backing off for a couple of kilometers and then hitting a group with a couple of guys either from your team or a couple of guys that are an advantage to get in front, and to put all your energy into getting away. And once you start being in the situation of you're towing other riders around, and it's obviously frustrating for you because all that work is being done, and teams are sitting on and they're going to piggyback off the back of it. Again, it's better for you to try and make a break and use the tactic of trying to get up the road. It's better to do that and fail than to tow other riders around and piggyback off the back of it. So yeah, it can be a very difficult situation, but try and use that tactic to the best of your advantage. So good luck with that. Okay, I've got another one here from Gary, saying that he is always trying to get away early in a group, but he finds that he uses up too much energy attacking at the start, and then when he gets into a move that he usually has little energy for the end. Dan, do you want to maybe answer that one?
Obviously, the issue here is, if you do too much at the start of a race, you can then be found wanting towards the end of the race because you've used a lot of energy. Equally, if you then think, okay, I'll sit back and I won't do any, follow any moves, follow any attacks at the first part of the race, if then a breakaway goes away, you've missed out, and it's it's all over, or it's going to take more energy to catch them in the first place. So I guess there's a fine balance, but you have to be selective. So you have to know. It really helps to know the other riders. So don't just be following every single attack. Left, right, left, right. You need to only follow attacks that have got the good riders in, and you think, right, is this group got a good chance? Does this look likely that they're going to get away and stay away? And be a little bit selective in which groups you follow. Go with the bigger groups. If it's just one or two riders, unless they're really, really strong riders, I wouldn't worry. When it's 4 or 5 guys, that they're the ones to be going with. And if it is 1 or 2, and then they start looking like they're going to, they are pulling away, there's always going to be other people that have missed out, and they're going to be trying to make a counter-attack. So then just follow the counter-attacks. But you have to be, you do have to be at the front, and you have to be following attacks. Otherwise, you're gonna miss out. But if you use too much energy and follow every single attack, then you are gonna, suffer at the end of the race. So there is a fine balance. You just need to decide which ones to go with. But the more information you know about the other riders, who's strong, who's on good form, that's when you can make those decisions a lot better.
Okay, I've got time for another one or two. This one's from Simon, saying that I find that I don't have a very explosive sprint, but I have the ability to sprint for quite a long time. Okay, so how best do I use this when it comes to a finish, as I feel I don't always maximise my sprint? So I think what you're saying is you maybe or have ability to produce maybe a power for quite a long period of time, but that power isn't really explosive compared to some other sprinters. I suppose in that situation I would be looking at obviously trying to have a sprint that's slightly longer. Probably sprints that are on a slight uphill, maybe a slight drag, where you can have more of a more of a prolonged effort and have big advantages of going long in a sprint, and seeing that the end result, I think is a good way to try and look at, okay, going for maybe races that you're able to get a good effort for maybe 30-40 seconds instead of waiting for that last 10-second burst, and not allowing riders to piggyback off the back of it again. So you look at some of the guys in the professional peloton that have maybe a real big explosive engine like Buhani or something like that are really good for 10 seconds, but then you're going against guys who maybe have a really good sprint for maybe 30 seconds, 40 seconds. You look at guys like Van Avermaet or maybe something like Gilbert, and you can see they'll probably start their sprints maybe for quite a long time. And it's probably trying to start your sprint a little bit earlier than others. Even if you find others are a wee bit apprehensive to start and they're waiting as close as possible, maybe to the last 200 metres or the last 150 metres to start a sprint, maybe you take the advantage by the scruff of the neck and you go with 350 metres to go. Again, just that initial sort of 5 seconds, hit it as hard as possible and just try and hold it as long as you can, and hope that that drag and that long effort isn't something other people are able to match. It's a bit of a risk going a little bit earlier, but if you feel that you have that ability to sprint and hold the power for a longer period of time compared to other people, then again you've got to be able to maximise that. So yeah, I think we've kind of gone over time here a little bit. Apologies for that, but hopefully you've all got something out of it. Again, maybe something that everybody is able to take a little bit out of. Maybe it's something new that you've got. Maybe you're new to cycling, and this has helped a basis of what you're able to learn and take into races in the future. We'd just like to thank you for coming along here this evening. If anybody would like to learn a bit more, or anybody would like to come on board and work with our specialists and coaches at Dig Deep Coaching, we'll be delighted to help you. Any questions or any queries on our services or anything that you heard tonight, please send us an email in there to info@digdeepcoaching, and we'll certainly get back to you as quick as possible. Check out our website for various prices on our coaching packages, power meters, nutrition services, etc. And we look forward to seeing you in the next one. We've got one coming up on sportive riding, so check that out on our website. And again, would like to thank you all for coming here tonight. So we'll see you all again soon. Dan?
Okay, thank you everybody, and look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Okay,
thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.